In 2016, I also started my YouTube channel because back then I was just your regular personal trainer. I did my gym instructor license, and then I worked at a gym, and then I left the gym, and then I got self-employed and decided I'd do my own thing as a personal trainer. And I was the generic personal trainer, right? Doing, everything, some barbells, some dumbbells. And then I bought some kettlebells because somebody told me that was an education that I got. And the guy told me, if you want to get started with kettlebells, you got to go get yourself some competition kettlebells because they're all the same size. One of the beautiful things about kettlebells is the ballistic nature. This is what separates the kettlebell from everything else. People will run in circles. So we need some general recommendations. So that's number one that I have an issue with the fitness industry. While I think it is true, we also need some general recommendations and some clear facts where you say, listen, this works and this doesn't. And so the second thing in the trainers industry or in the fitness industry is...
This week, I interviewed the founder of Lebe and a certified master of sport in kettlebell snatch, Gregory Jamali. Gregory has helped thousands of men and women over 40 build strength, burn fat, and train pain-free with his powerful hybrid kettlebell system. We discussed the advantages of using kettlebells versus traditional weights, along with the simplicity of using them, what separates kettlebells from everything else, his kettlebell training certification, training and recovery for 40-plus-year-olds, and his one tip to get your body back to what it once was. Really enjoyed my interview with Gregory. I know you will too. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Gryn, and I have Gregory on. Welcome to the show.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, glad to have you on. Your business name is Lebe, and we were just saying how people think that's your actual name, but you're Gregory Jamali. Is that right? Did I say it right?
Almost. It's not that easy to pronounce, right? Yeah, it's Gregory. I was named after Gregory Peck. This was a famous actor back in the day, and my mother loved him, so that's the guy I was named after, Gregory. And the last name is Jamali, so that's an Albanian surname from the eastern part of Europe. But I'm of Roma descent, so these are gypsies. So it's a very, very interesting backstory. And yes, Lebe is the business name. And yeah, I live in Switzerland. So yeah, a lot of things come together. Exactly.
Yeah. And when did you, maybe give a little background, when did you start your business? I know it's all about kettlebells. So we haven't had anyone on the podcast to talk about kettlebell training, and we're both over 40. So I think this will be good for the audience to get a different perspective on ways to train. And when did you start getting into kettlebells and turn it into a business?
Well, in 2016, I decided to become self-employed. That's when I had enough resources to at least make it 1 month, I remember. And I told myself, you know what, if you now try it and you get rid of your job, or you leave your day job and you try to make it on your own, you can at least survive 1 month. So that's a good outlook. And that was 2016. It was almost 10 years ago. It's
wow,
crazy.
That's great.
So it's crazy. Next year we celebrate our 10-year anniversary. This is massive. Yeah, we talked about how fast time flies, right? And in 2018, 17 around-ish, in 2016, I also started my YouTube channel because back then I was just your regular personal trainer. I did my gym instructor license, and then I worked at a gym, and then I left the gym, and then I got self-employed and decided I'd do my own thing as a personal trainer. And I was the generic personal trainer, right? Doing, everything, some barbells, some dumbbells. And then I bought some kettlebells because somebody told me that was an education that I got. And the guy told me, you know what, if you want to get started with kettlebells, you got to go get yourself some competition kettlebells because they're all the same size. And so I did this, but I had no clue. I had just the basics, right? Deadlifts, squats. If you have a little bit of a fitness background, these are the exercises that you can get down pat pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I did a video in German back then. I was doing videos in German about kettlebells. And I thought, you know what, the 5 best kettlebell exercises. And that video took off. And I was like, wow. So it seems like I learned back then in 2016, I heard that if the market is reacting to a certain piece of content, or maybe even to a product or a business idea, you have to follow its trail. And that's what I did. So I decided, you know what, let's jump into kettlebells. And I was your typical influencer. So I didn't know anything, but I taught people how to do swings and stuff, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's why I make reaction videos nowadays to that type of content, because that's where I come from. And then I've heard of Steve Cotter, who unfortunately passed away. For those who of the audience who don't know, Steve Cotter is a legend, was a legend in the kettlebell sphere, and he passed away with, I think he was 53 or 54,
Oh.
heart attack at the end of January. Crazy, crazy story. And I heard of Steve Cotter. I reached out to him because I knew he is the kettlebell dude. But I also heard of Strong First and RKC and Pavel Tsatsouline, but I didn't vibe with these guys. This was too much the tough guy approach. And Steve Cotter was open-minded. He was all about it was about the person and not about the tool or building a brand, so to speak. And not, I mean, it's okay to build a brand, but Strong First and Pavel was always a little bit cultish to me from the beginning. And then Steve Cotter, I invited him in 2019 into my gym, and he certified Angie and me. And yeah, ever since then, we hit the ground running. Then 2020, the pandemic happened. Everybody jumped on kettlebells. We had to close down the business, right? Because I have a personal training gym.
Okay.
And then I took a deep dive in kettlebells. And since then, yeah, I didn't look back. So yeah, it's brought me where I am today.
Yeah, that's quite the story. And it's interesting because I talk a lot about like micro workouts, because I think like even during the pandemic, I started doing these like short 20-minute, 30-minute workouts just to get it done. And it just takes the excuses out. And I noticed that with like a lot of your workouts, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, you can do like 5 things and just be done. I think that's what the beauty of, you could do that with, body weight exercises. You could do that a lot of ways, but, kettlebells are a convenient sort of easy way to sort of just implement into your life.
And you mentioned body weight, and Pavel Tsatsouline said this in a podcast with Andrew Huberman, and he's totally right about it. Body weight seems very innocent. Yeah, a couple of squats, a couple of push-ups, but if you've never moved in your life, try to hit the ground and do 10.
Right.
You won't be able to do it. Push-ups are tough. And body weight squats are one of the exercises that you have to know how to squat, and then it's great for the knees. And that's an exercise that we teach as well. So it's not that hard. But for example, a burpee is also a great exercise, but it's also pretty tough.
Yeah.
And so body weight, while you always have your body with you, it seems innocent, but it takes some let's say some already a little bit of an advanced level of fitness to really get a good workout in. And with kettlebells, the beautiful thing about it is you can incrementally load them. You can progressively load them. You can use an 8 kg, get started with a 12 kg, and then slowly progress your way up. And that's the beauty about it. And you mentioned the 30-minute mark. This is something that I always try to keep in mind when I train. My workouts with warm up and cool down, since we get a little bit older, we have to warm up a little bit longer. So my warm up takes about 7-8 minutes, mobility, and then a couple of swings, couple of snatches. And then I move into my main workout. And my main workout is always approximately 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I always make sure I stay in the 30-minute range, and I get the best of GPP. So I believe kettlebells are the ultimate form of GPP, which stands for General Physical Preparedness. So if that's what a lot of people look for, right? A little bit of mobility, a little bit of strength, a little bit of endurance. I want to elevate my fat burning potential. I want to save time. I don't want to do 10 exercises. I don't want to go out to the gym. So you can get your GPP with a couple of exercises. I'm a big fan of 3. For example, my current workout is thrust, jerk, and double half snatch with double bells. So that's 3 exercises. I do 10 reps, or I have a ladder. I do 10 reps with the jerk, then 8 reps with the double half snatch, and then 6 with the thrust jerk. And so then I have 1 set. I do 4 sets. That's my kettlebell main stuff. And then I do some body weight, some push-ups, some pull-ups, some dips. And that's my main workout on 2 days of the week. And I absolutely love it. It's just, it's awesome.
Yeah. And I think keeping it simple is the best way to go. And like you said, you have 3 main exercises that you focus on. I think sometimes people can be overwhelmed. They go to a gym and there's like all these different machines and all these different ways of doing exercises. And, with kettlebells, I implement them a little bit. I'm not like, it's not like the main focus of my workouts, but I like them because I think you can do different things that dumbbells don't allow you to do, which is like even just like kettlebell press ups where you're just like trying to stabilize. and, work on just like stabilizing the shoulder and the rotator cuff and things like that. And I think that's what attracts me to kettlebells, at least.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the beautiful thing about kettlebells is the ballistic nature. This is what separates the kettlebell from everything else. Swings, especially snatch. And depending on what type of style you're doing, I just recently was in a competition where I had 10 minutes and I had to do at least 100 reps with a 32 kg kettlebell to get my degree that I wanted, which is Master of Sport. And so with the snatch, you have everything in there. You have a little bit of strength, you have some endurance, you have mobility, you have pacing, breathing, which is incredibly important. And this separates the kettlebell from everything else. You pick up the bell, you do let's just say you start easy, 30 seconds of snatch per side, right? So that's the ballistic nature of it. Swings are awesome too, but once you really dig deep into kettlebells, clean, jerk, snatch, this is where the good stuff is. And this is what separates the bell from everything else. And I agree, when you press the bell up, which we do with kettlebells, we do that a lot, right? Jerking or pressing, you always go overhead. And that's something that many people don't do in their daily lives, right? When they go to the gym, they push in depth range, right? But when you go overhead, so many beautiful things happen, even for people who have banged up shoulders. And you're absolutely right. When you press the kettlebell overhead, so much stability is going on in the shoulder joint, which, other tools don't give you the same. And so that's why I always say the kettlebell is the best generalist tool, the best GPP tool. That's what almost everybody wants, especially the over 40 and 50 crowd, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's where the kettlebell shines, most definitely.
And I like using them for like farmers walks or like suitcase carries. They're good for that as well.
Yeah, awesome too. Exactly.
Have you,
especially the suitcase? Yeah,
the suitcase carry. Yeah, no, I love using them for that. Have you, like, obviously being in your 40s now, you're turning 41, you said, in a month or so. How is your training evolved from when you first started?
Well, I started lifting seriously in 2009. So that's my 16th consecutive year of training. And in my early days, I was doing probably what everybody was doing, right? The typical bodybuilding stuff, right? Inspired by Arnold and, bodybuilding. That's what I think many of us get into. And now, as I grow older, I love the time efficiency aspect, where I know I got everything sorted out in 40 minutes. So 30 plus, right? If you deduct the warm-up, you can also say, you know what? I make the warm-up part of my training where I just use some swings and some walks for warm-up. That's awesome too. So the time efficiency and heart rate training. Heart rate has become a big part of my training. Yeah. And I use my Apple Watch and I stick it around my ankle with this magnetic band like this.
Okay.
Because when you train with kettlebells, your wrists have to be free. Right. And a client of mine, he always did this. And I was like, I got to try this too, because I always wanted to track my workouts, but I couldn't, because with this I have the Ultra. And so when you clean a kettlebell properly, it always, even if you pull it very low, we always say you're supposed to train hands-free and wrist-free, right? And so now heart rate training became very, very big, because I realized that I probably spent a little bit too much time in the zone 5 or in the red zone, so to speak.
Right, like almost burning out a little bit.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, not even during training, because I've built my system up to a level of tolerance where I can tolerate fatigue pretty well. But the issue is I feel it afterwards. Being a business owner, having a family, and doing everything. It just adds to the level of stress to a certain extent. And I recognized this and realized this a couple of years ago. And so with heart rate training, it got way better. So I can still focus on going hard. But I also realized that if I, for example, do double jerk, so jerk is bell overhead, falling into a second dip, fixating the bell overhead, back into the rack. If I do a set of 10 reps with a double 28s, so 28s is, what is this? 58 pound, I think, for American.
Right.
So 258 pounder or 56 something, right?
Right.
So when I do 10 reps with double 28s, my heart rate jumps up to 180 immediately.
Wow.
And so I didn't pay enough attention to my rest.
Yeah.
Or making sure that the heart rate goes back down. And since I now pay attention to it, because now I have more quality time under tension, because if I do a burst set with a very heavy weight and my heart rate jumps up, then I have to wait until my heart rate goes back to maybe, let's say, 150. 145 is perfect, but 150 is minimum. Then my central nervous system is recuperated and I can go back at it again and get some more quality time under tension. And that's a big thing that I've also realized. I'm big on time under tension. So you mentioned, right, 30 minutes is your time frame where you want to train. And so if you want to get a lot of results out of it and a lot of benefits, make sure you spend enough time under tension, which means make sure you're not distracted, put your phone away, stay focused with the workout, don't rest too much, depending on what type of training you do. If you focus a little bit more endurance, then you can rest a little bit less. But if you go into speed, explosiveness, and strength and muscle building with burst sets, it makes sense to rest a little bit longer. And so then, if you're big on time under tension, I now differentiate between time under tension and quality time under tension. So if your central nervous system has enough time to recuperate, your prime movers can put more tension into the exercise, which means if you look at the size principle of the muscle, which means if your central nervous system is already weak or already tired, this means your muscle is not fully working, even though you go through a very heavy set. And so it might still be time under tension, but it's not that good quality because you didn't rest enough, right? But then at the same time, don't rest too long, right? Because you don't want to fall out of the groove of training. And so that's why I love kettlebells and I love digging into this stuff. This is so fascinating.
Yeah, no, you make a good point. Like, you're stressing the system, and now that you're using the heart rate monitor, you're understanding like where you get to a point of like being recovered to some degree, so you're able to explode and come back with that much more, that the same amount of effort that you did the set before. I always say that you like, I use, like, sometimes I'll do like the Rogue Echo bike, like the one that a lot of CrossFitters use. And if you go hard on that, like, you gotta make sure
the assault bike, right, with arms
the assault
and
bike,
right,
yeah, that thing is
tough.
just oof.
That thing is brutal. Most definitely.
Yeah, I should use it more. I don't. I mean, I always say for something like that, you don't need to do it a ton, right? Like, especially, once a week or twice a week at most, maybe, if you want, depending on what you're training for. But like something like that, I talk about high intensity repeat training where you're allowed to give yourself enough time to recover so you can come back and repeat that same set with the same amount of effort. Exactly.
Yeah. And this is it's funny because this is what I read. I just finished this book. This is an awesome book. It's called The Science and Practice of Strength Training by Zatsiorsky, Kramer, and Fry.
Okay.
An awesome book. And Zatsiorsky was quoted by Pavel often. And I think that's the third edition. Yeah, it's the third edition. And I read through it. And a lot of it goes in line with what Verkhoshansky says. So I'm a big fan of the Soviet literature, the old Soviet literature of sports science. And this is exactly repeat training. You say, or I think they call it the dynamic effort, or the dynamic effort method. Yes. It's you go all in and then you rest enough and then you come back at it. Then there's the submaximal effort where you say, you go not all in. You just say, like, for example, my 10 reps of one jerk with double 28s. I could crank out maybe 15 or 20, but then I'm completely gassed. And then I'm probably going towards muscle failure or system failure. With kettlebells, they're not just taking your muscle, they eat your soul alive. That's what they do.
Right.
So it is systemic failure. So depending on the method that you're trying to use, it always makes sense. This is how we differentiate it. If you're focused on strength, muscle, and explosiveness, I put them in one category. You usually use heavier weights, you usually use less reps, and you usually lose more rest. So that's one section of training. And right. Zatsiorsky even says in the book, Science and Practice of Strength Training, always put strength first. So I have a principle, I call it FIRST, that's FRST, which means first strength, then stamina. So I always focus that the strength, which I consider muscle building and explosiveness and speed, I put that in the same category. This comes first because this taxes your central nervous system like crazy. And then afterwards, you can do some EMOMs when you focus on strength endurance or endurance. And so the key here is to understand, for example, you mentioned CrossFit. I think CrossFit has great ideas, and I also think that they mess up some of the training systems. So if we say we use EMOM, which I love, this is such a great way to train. You have 1 minute of work, you have one exercise, you do 8 reps or 5 reps, whatever the amount of reps is, and then you rest until the next minute begins. This is a great way to train. Then you have rest and training baked into one system. You have 10 minutes, so 10 EMOMs, and then let's say we have 10 EMOMs, 10 minutes with 10 snatch, right? Great. You don't have to think. You let the timer do its thing. You count your reps, you rest, you walk around. So this might work well with a snatch, for example, with a lighter weight, where I say, all right, for me, let's use a 24 kg. I do 10 to 15 reps, or let's stick with the 10 reps. And then this is rather strength endurance for my level of skill. Maybe for somebody else, it's too heavy. They have to maybe use a 10 or a 12, doesn't matter. But you have to use a weight that is not too heavy, because it's not supposed to tax your central nervous system too much. Because if it does, and you don't have enough rest, you probably burn yourself, right? Does that make sense? So it's always make sure that the strength part has enough rest for the central nervous system to recuperate. But then when you walk into strength endurance and endurance, you can reduce the rest a little bit and stay a little bit in that red zone.
Right. I'm assuming like when you're doing more of an endurance base, you're doing a little bit lighter kettlebell and having less rest time. And then for the more of a strength.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're just doing a heavier with more rest.
Exactly. So one thing that I would never do, or that I stopped doing, I wouldn't do the double 28s, right? Jerk. I wouldn't do 6 reps for 10 EMOMs. I wouldn't do it.
What does an EMOM stand for? Just so people.
EMOM is, again, you do the 6 jerk.
Okay. The
minute starts ticking. You do your 6 reps. And then you have rest until the next minute begins. That's every minute on the minute. That's
so if it takes you, oh wow, so if it takes you 20 seconds to do that, then you get 40-second rest.
Exactly.
Okay.
And even if I am able to crank out the 6 or 8 or whatever reps in 20 to 30 seconds, and I have 40 to 30 seconds of rest, I know that it's not enough. Okay. Because the weight is so taxing that I need more rest. But if I would use 128 lighter, and do 8 jerk lighter, that's okay, right?
Now you got me motivated to get into kettlebells.
You have to.
I'm ready.
That's my job.
Well, I mean, I've been, like you, like I started lifting, I was 18, so ish 17. I'm 44. So, I think like having these conversations and learning different modalities is like important, because I think you can, who knows, 10 years from now, you might be doing something else. I don't know. I'm just saying it's good to have these like the tools in the toolbox, right? Where would you say, like, if, I'm in the States, but like I know you mentioned First Strong, right? What's like Strong a good, first, Strong First. I knew it was. Where's a good place to get started if someone wanted to just learn kettlebells and get certified?
Putting me on the spot here.
and if you don't, honestly, you're in Switzerland, so there's probably different places there than there are in the States.
We have, there used to be. I used to recommend the IKFF because that was my sensei, Steve Carter. But since he passed away, I'm not sure how the IKFF is run now. Okay. So that's the International Kettlebell Fitness and Federation. International Kettlebell Fitness Federation. So I'm not sure on how they run now. IKFF. Okay. Then, Strong First and RKC, that's a great place to start too. They teach a different style or a different idea of kettlebells. And then we also offer a certification program, and we've certified a couple of trainers who now work with us as well. Nice. And what I do differently, because that's what I was missing, what I do differently is I have a mentorship. So it's not a weekend course, but with me, you're going through at least 12-month mentorship. You mentioned the toolbox, right? So you can look at this from 2 perspectives, depending on who the audience is. If you have an audience of coaches, here's what I would say. Yes, it is generally recommended that they tell you you have to use all the tools in the toolbox. Here's the key. Then you'll always be trainer number 4,250,301. you'll be lumped in with everybody else because you do everything, but you do it average, right? I'm a little bit blunt here. And so in today's day and age, what I have seen is my specialty with kettlebells put me on the spot. And so the kettlebell gives me everything that I need. I still think barbells are awesome. I think body weight is awesome. I think dumbbells are awesome. I love all these modalities. But like I said, I think the kettlebell gives you the GPP, the general physical performance, which almost all over 40s and 50s, over 50s need. That being said, as a trainer, yes, you have to look at it maybe from a perspective, a bird's eye perspective, but you must specialize. That's my take, because that was my journey. Maybe I'm a little bit blindsided because that's my experience, but I always liken it to the doctors and the surgeons. You can be a regular doctor who takes patients, like 45 patients a day, right? Where you treat everything a little bit, and if something needs specialty, you refer out, or you become the guy or the gal that gets referred out to. And I'm a big fan because I've seen it in my practice. I've seen it in my success. I've seen it the way that I do business now is my specialty is setting me apart. So that's something to consider. I know everybody says in the fitness industry, they say, hey, it depends. I hate that. Even though it's true, I hate it that everybody gets this recommendation. It's like in fitness, well, what's your goal? Well, I wanna do this and that. What should I choose? Well, it depends. All right, so then you give the second answer. Yeah, okay, so I want to do this and that. Can you give me now a clear answer? Well, it still depends. Do you want to build strength or muscle? Well, you get what I'm saying? It's people need some general recommendations. That's the reason why they tune into YouTube. Imagine all fitness influencers would always say it depends. People would run in circles. So we need some general recommendations. So that's number one that I have an issue with the fitness industry. While I think it is true, we also need some general recommendations and some clear facts where you say, listen, this works and this doesn't. And so the second thing in the trainers industry or in the fitness industry is exactly this is what you mentioned with the toolbox. Yeah, be like the jack of all trades and master of none to a certain extent. And then you'll always have this, you'll always compete with everybody. So I stopped competing with everybody. I'm building a sea of my own, right?
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, for you being on YouTube and you know, specializing in kettlebells, I mean, I think having a niche is important. I was just saying that, like, being someone that's been lifting for so long, it's nice to have no different modalities that you can come in and out of. And, you know, because sometimes things get old and boring, you know, like, you know, for a while I was doing resistance bands. Now I've come back to more traditional lifting. But yeah, for you having, you know, your specialty being kettlebells, I think that's why your channel's probably has done so well, is because, you know, they know exactly where to go if they want to learn about kettlebells. And that's, you know, that's obviously a good niche to be.
And, you know, the interesting part is also that it's not just the niche on YouTube. It also spills over into my coaching business, my in-gym practice that I have.
Yeah.
I target the over 40s and 50s. I have seen that it's an interesting story. I started doing kettlebells, and then I started focusing solely and exclusively on kettlebell training, on what we do. I have seen that the average age now in our gym is 51. I have seen that 55% who watch our YouTube channel are between 40 and 57. So this told me right from the start, I realized a certain demographic clicks with kettlebells, and that's that age group, right? And so now I target that age group, and of course you know how it goes. You have to give them what they want before you give them what they need, right? So, hey, do you want to get strong, fit, and lean without going to the gym? Here's my ebook. So this is how I reach out to the over 40s and 50s. I say that's exclusively for the over 40 and 50. And then once I have them in, I then teach them the method and say, well, what we use is this, right? And we are the specialists here, right? And that's the reason why I have the over 40-50 program. This is the tool that I use. I'm the specialist. And I've seen that this has changed our business tremendously. And even you mentioned boring, right? This is what I get often. So imagine one of the cool things about the kettlebell, especially if you learn the Russian style, the kettlebell sports style. The cool thing about it is such a intricate, detailed style that requires a lot of skill. And so if you are an ambitious person and you pick up a heavy kettlebell or you pick up a bell and you start to learn snatch or the jerk, and then you work with a coach who can show you the intricacies on the details of these particular styles, especially the kettlebell sports style. And then your ambition kicks in and you say, I want to learn this exercise because A, I love it. The enjoyment is awesome. My body loves the exercise. And now I want to get really good at it. So that's what we've seen with almost everybody, even people who never lifted weights in their life. And they say, I want to get really good at it. Not everybody, but a huge chunk says, I want to get really good at this. And so then it doesn't get boring because you always focus on, you have variation in the basics, but you always focus on the core principles with some slight variations. You really want to get good at this. And then at the same time, you get results. So, right? So this eliminates the boring perspective of it.
Well, I mean, it's important. I think enjoyment is a big part of people coming back and being consistent. Like, and like with kettlebells, if they can enjoy that over anything else, I think that's important. Also, as far as like injury prevention, how do you feel like kettlebells have a leg up on other traditional lifting modalities?
I don't have insights on a particular depth with other modalities where I can say, listen, I've worked over 10 years with barbells and that's what they did.
Right.
So I can speak for the other modalities, but what I can tell you is that we get so much feedback, not just in gym, because that's a very small percentage of people that we coach in our gym, but from all around the world. And that is, my back gets better with swings, my shoulder gets better with swings or presses, just the kettlebell, just the ballistics in general. My mobility improves. Enjoyment, you mentioned enjoyment, so they stick to it, so they improve their physical ailments. And we work with everybody. Arthritis, frozen shoulders, artificial knees, artificial hips, all physical ailments that you can imagine are in our gym. And we work with these people. And of course, I'm transparent. I'm not saying that the kettlebell is the cure to everything, but we see that it has some therapeutic benefits, most definitely.
I like to ask this question to most people that come on the podcast. What's one thing you've changed your mind on in the past 10, 15 years? And it doesn't have to be even kettlebell related. It could be something else.
Many things. Yeah. Let's take something completely different than kettlebells. I used to think that love was a feeling until I realized that love is a decision. So that was a major game changer. So because when you're in love, it's all everything's rainbows and stuff. But then when life, it's like with training. You're motivated. You want to travel to the moon. You're ready to rock. I'm ready. I got this. Oh, I can't wait. And so then life comes back in, right? And then it becomes a decision. So that's something that I've realized. So love is a decision. That's a big one. Doesn't mean that feeling is not involved at all. Right. And attractiveness and everything, of course. But when you spend time with a person for a very long time, and I've been with Angie now for 10 years. Last year was 10 years. And so that's a milestone in and all by itself. And we've told ourselves the more time I spend with her, the more I realize I have to make a conscious decision to please her, to do things that she likes, to not always get mad when she says something about the household, because she's the queen here. She takes care of everything. So that's fine. So that's something that I changed my mind on. I changed my mind on training often. So I used to think completely different when it comes to training. I used to only focus on muscle, and I thought this is the only road that everybody should travel. It's always aesthetics and muscle and leanness. Until I realized, health is very important. It's not, for many people, it's not that important, especially for our crowd, of how they look. Not saying, again, same with love, that aesthetics doesn't matter at all. Right. But there are other components that become way more important. What
would you say you focus on outside of kettlebells as far as like nutrition, recovery? Like how do you stack your day and make sure that you're getting those things as well?
Well, I'll keep it very simple. I try to go to sleep early. Not easy. I try to spend less time on this thing.
The phone. Yeah.
Yeah, that's again not easy. And as far as recovery goes, I have to listen to my body a little bit. No, here's the key. I have to listen to my age. It's funny, right? I always used to think, well, over 40, 50, who cares? You train the same. You go all in. Until I realized, well, I think I have to. I still love intensity and I love heavy weights. And especially when you master a skill, you always want to I always want to go there. I always want to go balls to the walls, right? And I realize I need deloading weeks. So there are some weeks where I have to use intentionally, I have to force myself to use less weight. And then as far as nutrition goes, I try to keep it simple. Make sure protein with every meal, protein from every type of source, and make sure you keep the processed stuff as little as possible. So what we do is on the weekends, we go out once, Angie and me, we go out. We go to eat every Saturday. We eat out in our favorite restaurant that's just 10 minutes from here.
How's the food in Switzerland?
Well, it's awesome. It's awesome. A client of mine, it's one thing that is so interesting. A client of mine, he's from Pennsylvania. So he came to Switzerland because of his job. And then he said, hey, can I visit? Can I come over and visit? I said, of course you can visit the sanctuary. So he came over, we had a session, it was awesome. And he said, hey, you know what's crazy? I lost 3 or 4 pounds while I was in Switzerland. I said, how come? He said, well, no snacking culture. And I said, ooh, interesting. So we talked about it in our recent session. I said, well, can you explain a little bit? He said, well, in the US, or at least where he is, he says, I have access to food every second at the house. Then when I go to work, they have a little snack bar where the employees come together to put in stuff, and then you pay some honorary fee.
Okay.
And so he has always access to food every time. And I mean, you guys in the States, your stores are open 24/7, right?
A lot of times, and there's a Starbucks on every corner. So
yeah,
you know,
right.
And
you're open in the middle of the night, right? I could go get it often, right?
But depending on where you're at, like I'm north of Chicago, but it depends where you're at. But there's usually something open 24 hours. And I'm also assuming with Switzerland, and maybe like they use less of these like artificial flavorings and ingredients that are allowed in the foods in the States. And I'm assuming I'm sure there's junk food in Switzerland, but perhaps it's a little bit, I don't know. There's more of a restriction.
I think the major difference is the sizes.
Okay.
The portion sizes. You guys have massive sizes. That's when the first time I was in the States, I saw a Red Bull can. I was like, whoa, I could sip on this thing for a week. What is this? And so in Switzerland, the portion sizes are completely different. But still, obesity rates climbed up in Switzerland. I think in the 70s or the 80s was like, and they lumped together overweight and obesity, right? They lumped it together. And I think it was in 20%, something like 30 or 40 years ago. And now we sit at 47 or 45.
Really?
So every second person in Switzerland is at least overweight, it seems. So, right, everybody has the issue. The Western diet is an issue.
Yeah.
So we're not exempt from this, but the difference in our case is, again, our stores mostly close at 7 or 8, and then that's it, right? But that doesn't stop people from buying stuff and then hoarding it at their house and then always having access to it, right? Which is one thing that we recommend, where we say, listen, maybe you cut down a little bit so that you don't have that stuff all around, because if you have it always in your house, somebody's going to eat it. Right. And so I try to keep, it's a very simple, basic approach. And, you see a lot of this, the cold plunges and the, and all, the typical Roganosphere stuff where people really grind out on recovery. I just make sure I sleep enough. I get some of my vitamins. I make sure I have some healthy sources of food, and I train.
Yeah.
So that's it.
And you train, you do your kettlebell. It's pretty much a total body workout, right? For the most part, you're not like specializing in, and then you're doing that, like 3 days a week or 4 days a week? Or?
I train between 4 and 5.
4 and 5. Okay.
Yeah.
30 minutes.
That's because I'm addicted to it. So that's why. But if your goal is just, if you're not like me and you're not a fitness crackhead or a kettlebell crackhead, you can still say, hey, how much do I need to change my levels of fitness and get results. And I always say the best question to ask is, how many times do I have to train over the year, not per week? And so if you can get 50 to 60 workouts per year, you're golden. Now, if you want to optimize and then really change your looks, change your physique, and take it to the next level, then we always say the better you want to look, the more results you want, the more sacrifices you have to give, right? But at the foundational level, it's pretty simple. 1 or 2 workouts a week. Make sure you train 50 to 60 workouts the year, and you're golden. You're going to change, almost guaranteed. And you asked about the differentiation between full body or split. The only thing that I focus on is it rather a strength endurance day, or is it rather a heavy day with burst sets, right? And so I do burst sets twice a week. So today was Friday, so I did burst sets. Wednesday, I did my burst set, the same principle. Oh no, Wednesday I was outdoors. Loved it. Another awesome thing about kettlebells. You pick up your bell, you put it in your trunk, you drive down your sports field or whatever, you take it outside the trunk, you do a couple of cleans, swings, presses, snatch, you run a 400 meters, or that's 200 yards or whatever that is. You go back to the bell, you do some swings, you run again. This is so awesome. It's such a great way to train. And on Monday, we have our regular GPP stuff where we combine everything because that's where the content day is. Then we film the workout of the week for our Kettlebell Plus members. And then on Saturday is always a little bit experimentation and rather light. And then when I'm really all powered up, I do Tuesday and Thursday. I train as well, but not as often. These are usually my rest days. And then I do rowing 1 kilometer with the water rower, and then a couple of snatches. And that's maybe like a 15-minute workout.
Sounds good. And what would you say, what one mistake that people make when they get into kettlebell training?
I think that it depends on where you come from. So the most people, when they come from a fitness background, the regular gym bro background, or you don't even have to be a gym bro, just your regular gym style training. Mm-hmm. They have a similar question. They come up with, well, how do I split, right? So with kettlebells, you can use the kettlebell like a weird shaped dumbbell. Of course you can. But the first mistake is treating the kettlebell like a regular gym machine dumbbell barbell.
Right.
The second mistake is being too tense. So that's a major thing that people realize with kettlebells. You have to understand when to contract, and you have to understand when to relax. So you become subtle and you become fast, right? So it's tension and relaxation. Oh. And another major mistake is thinking that you have to use 25 exercises. But that's where many people come from, right? When in the gym, you have machines, right? You have your elliptical, you have your treadmill. Then you have, if you train at Planet Fitness every Monday night, you get pizza.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah. So you come up with this idea that you think you have to do 10, 15 different exercises. And the minimalistic approach of kettlebell, since it's full body, and of course you can tweak a little bit. You can say, okay, let me focus a little bit more on upper body. Let me focus a little bit more on the legs. You can, but it's always a systemic training. So systemic efforts, your whole body is taxed.
Love that. No, you're getting me motivated. I'm going to follow some of your videos.
Go ahead. You have to.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we'll finish up with this question. What's one tip you'd give someone who's, 40, 50, 60 plus, who's, looking to get their body back to what it once was, maybe 5, 10, 15 years ago? What one tip would you give them?
I mean, yeah, I'm biased, of course. So I would say, really, consider picking up a solid kettlebell and consider the approach that you don't have to train every day. You don't have to change your life. You don't have to do a 180. You just have to change a little bit, but stay consistent, right? Consistency is the major issue with people who get started. Yeah. So if you just do, and let's just use a very generic example, every other day you do 50 swings or 20 or 10. And then you go up to, maybe you start at 10, then it's 20, then it's 30, then it's 40. Let's say you end up with 50 swings every other day. You do this for a full year, you're going to change. So, and it is so simple. But the crazy thing is, right, when you look at fitness and when you look at other areas too, right, it looks so complicated because you think you have to do all these crazy things that you see the influencers do. Or you hear me say, I train 4 to 5 days. Oh, I got to do this too. No. You start easy. You start small. Keep it simple, stupid, right? The KISS principle. And you stay consistent.
Love that. Well, Greg, this was great. Where's the best place for people to find you and learn about you?
Very simple. You go to YouTube, you type in kettlebell, and I guarantee you'll find me there.
Yes. And you go under your, you say it better than I do. So
yeah, Lebe stock.
I don't want to say it sounds good when you sounds good when you
yeah.
say it. I sound like American.
Yeah. Yeah, the leap start. But you know what's crazy? It's now I thought when I got started in 2016, I told myself I'm going to use a German name because every trainer around here uses an English name. And now that we are international, I'm like, man, I should have chosen an English name. But so many people are like, no, stick with it. I'm like, all right, it's like Rammstein, like the German rock band.
Yeah.
Lebe stock. Yeah, that's what it is.
Love
exactly.
it. Love it. All right,
awesome.
Greg. Thank you again. This was a great conversation, and we'll put links in the show notes so people can find you.
Yes, sir. Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangryn.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.